Long ago, in a small African village surrounded by green hills, lived a kind-hearted man named Obiora. He was a farmer who grew yams, corn, and beans. Although Obiora was not rich, he always helped his neighbors. If someone needed food, he shared what little he had. If someone was sick, he would visit them with herbal remedies. The people of the village loved him and often said, Obiora's heart is pure gold. But Obiora laughed and replied, I am just an ordinary farmer trying to do what is right. One sunny morning, Obiora went to his farm as usual. The air was fresh and the birds chirped happily in the trees. While digging the soil with his old rusty hoe, Obiora's hand slipped and the sharp edge of the hoe caught his finger. Ouch! He cried, dropping the hoe. He grabbed his hand and looked at the cut. But instead of red blood, something shiny dripped out. Golden liquid flowed from his wound, sparkling under the sunlight. Obiora's eyes widened with surprise. Obiora quickly wrapped his finger with a piece of cloth. His heart raced as he thought, is this real? Am I dreaming? He carefully picked up his hoe and hurried back to the village. On his way, he bumped into Nkechi, his closest friend. Nkechi, look at this, he said, unwrapping the cloth to show her the golden stain. Nkechi stared at it in shock. Obiora, this is not normal. Your blood is gold. You must keep this a secret, she warned. Greedy people would try to hurt you. Despite Nkechi's warnings, the news spread quickly. A curious neighbor saw the golden cloth and whispered it to another. Soon, the entire village was talking about the man who bled gold. Traders, travelers, and strangers from other villages came to see Obiora. Some offered him money for his golden blood, while others begged him to share his gift. Obiora felt overwhelmed. He didn't know why his blood turned into gold, and he did not want trouble. He wished life could go back to normal. One day, the village chief came to Obiora's home with a worried look. Obiora, he said, this news has reached the king. His messengers are on their way here. The king is a greedy man, and I fear he will try to take you away. You must hide. But Obiora shook his head. I have done nothing wrong. I cannot run from the king. I will speak to him and explain the truth, he said. The chief sighed and left, knowing the king would never listen to reason. The next morning, soldiers arrived in the village, dressed in shiny armor. They marched straight to Obiora's hut and said, the king commands you to come to the palace. If you refuse, we will take you by force. Obiora calmly replied, I will come with you, but I ask that you do not harm my people. The soldiers nodded, but their eyes sparkled with greed as they glanced at Obiora's hands, hoping to see gold. Nkechi cried as she watched her friend being taken away. The soldiers brought Obiora to the king's grand palace. The walls were decorated with gold and the air smelled of expensive perfumes. The king sat on a high throne, dressed in fine robes and heavy jewelry. Obiora, he said with a sly smile, I have heard of your special blood. You are no ordinary man. Your gift belongs to the kingdom. From now on, you will bleed gold for me. Obiora bowed his head and said, Your Majesty, my blood is not a gift to take. It flows when I'm hot. The king frowned. We shall see about that, he said. He ordered one of his servants to bring a sharp knife. The servant hesitated but obeyed. Cut his hand, the king commanded. The servant nervously made a small cut on Obiora's palm. To everyone's surprise, only red blood flowed. The king's face turned red with anger. You dare lie to me? He shouted. Obiora replied, I am not lying. My blood turns gold only when I act out of kindness. It does not flow for greed. The king refused to believe Obiora. He locked him in a dark prison cell with chains around his wrist. You will stay here until you bleed gold for me, the king declared. Days turned into weeks and Obiora sat in the cold cell, growing weaker. The villagers missed him terribly. Nkechi tried to visit him, but the guards would not allow her. She prayed every night, asking the spirits to protect her friend and bring him back home safely. While in the cell, Obiora began to understand the truth about his gift. His golden blood was not just a miracle, It was a sign of goodness. It appeared only when he helped others with a pure heart. Greed and cruelty would never bring the gold, he thought. Meanwhile, the king grew more impatient. He ordered his men to hurt Obiora again, hoping to see the golden blood. But no matter what they did, only red blood came out. The king was furious. Back in the village, the people grew angry with the king. They loved Obiora and could not bear to see him suffer. Nkechi gathered the villagers and said, "We must do something. Obiora has always helped us. Now it is our turn to help him." The villagers agreed. They decided to march to the palace and demanded his release. The next morning, they walked together, carrying signs and chanting, "Free Obiora! Free Obiora!" Their voices grew louder as they approached the palace gates. The king's guards tried to stop the villagers, but they were outnumbered. The people stood outside the palace, refusing to leave until the king set Obiora free. Inside, the king grew nervous. He did not want to lose the trust for the villagers, but he also did not want to give up Obiora's gift. Finally, he came up with a plan. "I will release Obiora," the king announced, "but if only he bleeds gold in front of everyone. If he fails, he will remain my prisoner forever." The villagers were angry when they heard the king's demand. Nkechi stepped forward and shouted, "Obiora's blood is not for your greed, king. Let him go now, or we will not leave." The king laughed. "You are just villagers. What can you do against the king?" He sneered. But inside, the king felt scared. He knew the villagers' unity was powerful. He reluctantly brought Obiora to the courtyard, still in chains. "Show them your golden blood, or you will never live," the king threatened. Obiora stood tall, even though he was weak from weeks in the cell. He looked at the crowd of the villagers who had come to save him. Tears filled his eyes as he saw their love and courage. "I cannot make my blood turn gold for your greed," Obiora said calmly, "but I can show you the power of kindness." The king scoffed, but the villagers cheered for Obiora. Ikechi ran to his side and held his hand. "We believe in you," she whispered. Suddenly, a young boy from the crowd cried out, "Help me, I'm sick." The boy's mother was holding him, and he looked pale and weak. Without hesitation, Obiora stepped forward. "Release me," he told the guards, "so I can help this boy." The king hesitated but finally nodded. The guards unlocked Obiora's chains and he knelt beside the boy. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and tied it around the boy's head. "You will be well," he said softly. As Obiora tended to the boy, something incredible happened. Golden blood began to flow from a small scratch on Obiora's hand. It dripped onto the ground, shining brightly. The villagers gasped, and the king's eyes widened with greed. "It's true! He bleeds gold!" the king shouted, but Obiora ignored him. He gently wiped the boy's face and gave him water. Slowly, the boy smiled and said, "I feel better." The villagers cheered loudly, praising Obiora for his kindness. The king stepped forward, reaching for the golden drops on the ground. "The gold is mine," he declared. But as soon as his fingers touched the golden blood, it vanished into thin air. The king stared in shock. "What is this trickery?" he roared. Obiora stood and said, "The gold is not yours to take. It only comes from kindness, not greed. You cannot steal it or use it for evil." The villagers clapped and shouted, "Obiora is right." Angry and embarrassed, the king ordered his guards to seize Obiora again, but the villagers formed a circle around him, holding hands tightly. "You will not take him," Nkechi said firmly. The guards hesitated. They knew they could not fight the entire village. The king's face turned red with fury. "You are all disobeying your king," he shouted, but the villagers stood their ground. "You are not a true king if you harm the people," one elder said. "We will no longer follow you." The king realized he was losing control. The villagers were united and even his guards seemed unsure of what to do. In a desperate attempt, the king grabbed a knife and lunged at Obiora. "If I can't have your gold, no one will," he yelled. But before he could strike, Nkechi and several villagers blocked him. The knife fell from the king's hand and he stumbled back. The crowd erupted in anger. "Enough!" they shouted. "This king does not deserve to rule." The villagers pushed the king back into his palace. "Leave us in peace," they demanded. The king, now trembling with fear, begged for mercy. I will give up my throne, he cried. Just don't harm me. The villagers agreed, but only on one condition: the king must leave the village forever. The king had no choice but to accept. He gathered his belongings and fled, never to return. The villagers celebrated their victory, singing and dancing in the courtyard. With the king gone, the village needed a new leader. The elders gathered and said, Obiora, you have shown great kindness and courage. You should lead us. But Obiora shook his head. I am just a farmer, he said. I cannot be your leader, but I will always be here to help and guide you. The villagers respected his decision. They chose a wise leader to be their new leader and promised to work together to build a better future. Obiora returned to his simple life, but he was no longer just a farmer. People from far and wide came to see him, hoping to learn from his kindness. He taught them the importance of helping others and sharing what they had. True wealth, he said, is not gold or riches. It is the love and respect of your community. The villagers followed his teachings and their village became a place of peace and prosperity. One day, as Obiora was working on his field, a traveler stopped by. Are you the man who bleeds gold? The traveler asked. Obiora smiled and replied, I am just a farmer who tries to help others. The gold is not mine, it is a gift from the spirit. It comes only when I act with love. The traveler nodded and said, Your story has inspired many people. You are a true hero. Obiora felt grateful but remained humble. Years passed and the village grew stronger and happier. The people remembered Obiora's words and helped each other in times of need. Whenever someone tried to take more than their share, the villagers reminded them of the greedy king who lost everything. They learned that greed leads to ruin, but kindness brings blessings. The village became a shining example for others to follow, and visitors came to learn their ways. As Obiora grew older, he often sat under the big old baobab tree in the village square, surrounded by children. He told them stories about his adventures and taught them important lessons. Always share what you have, he said. When you help others, you create a better world. The children listened with wide eyes, eager to learn from the man who bled gold. They promised to carry his teachings into the future. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Obiora sat quietly on his farm, watching the golden light fade into the horizon. He felt at peace, knowing he had lived a life of purpose. Nkechi visited him and said, You have done so much for this village. We will never forget you. Obiora smiled and replied, It is the village that has done so much for me. Together we have created something beautiful. Years later, when Obiora passed away, the villagers gathered to honor his memory. They built a statue of him in the village square, holding a golden heart. Underneath the statue, they wrote, Kindness is the greatest treasure. People from far and wide came to see the statue and hear the story of the man who bled gold. His legacy lived on, inspiring generations to come. Even though Obiora was gone, his spirit remained in the village. Whenever someone helped a neighbor or shared their food, they felt a sense of joy, as if Obiora's golden blood was still flowing. The villagers believed that his kindness had blessed the land forever. The crops grew bountifully and the people lived in harmony. They knew that true wealth was not in gold but in their love for one another. The story of Obiora spread across the land, reaching distant villages and towns. People began to tell the tale to their children, teaching them about the dangers of greed and the power of kindness. Remember the man who bled gold, they said. He showed us that helping others is the most valuable gift of all. The tale became a legend passed down through generations. To this day, when the sun sets and its golden rays touch the earth, the villagers say, Obiora is watching over us. His story reminds them to be kind and generous even in difficult times. And so the legacy of the man who bled gold continues to shine, not in the form of riches, but in the heart of those who choose to live with love and compassion. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point, please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment in the comment section. It will help grow my small YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I post interesting content like this. If you haven't seen my other videos, do well to see them. I have other interesting content and interesting stories on my YouTube channel. See you guys in my next video. Bye.